welcome to podcast episode 9. I can't believe we're there already.
Can't believe
And
it either.
I am here as always with Tava. And
Hello.
last week, if you were with us, we started talking about angels, and the conversation really just took on a life of its own. And Samael was really active and was steering our conversation as well. There was so much energy moving and there was so much coming through that we looked up and it had been 2.5 hours. We realized that that would be a really long podcast for you. So, what we did was take the first section of the podcast and made that the last one, which was episode 8. And then at a point in the conversation, everything started shifting to Metatron. And at that point, it felt like the perfect shift to the next episode. So today we are going to give you the ending of the last podcast's conversation where we really started diving into Metatron, and then we're going to continue that conversation. So we just wanted to give you a little bit of a sense of how everything is going to flow. And before we get into playing for you the end of our last conversation, I'm going to, as we always do, sing us an invocation. And my intention for this invocation is to bring back in and invoke and invite Archangel Metatron to come through for this podcast and share what needs to be shared to support all of us on our journey.
We have a conversational angel already.
Wonderful. My favorite kind.
That was lovely. I would like to start off by saying I don't know what I'm talking about this week and how that actually I think will be good here. Um, my extent of knowledge about Metatron is that I know you can get a crystal grid called Metatron's Cube. I don't know how you use it. I don't know any of his history, other than the name that he is an angel. Um, and this is all that I looked up on him. I was curious about the name because when you think about archangels, a lot of their names end in that AL. You have like Raphael, Michael, Samael. So the Metatron made me curious, and I love the history of words because Metatron sounds to me like a transformer from a 1980s movie. I'd never watched the Transformers. Maybe there is one. But it's this very almost feels like it has like a metallic sound to it name. And I wanted to know what is the history of that name. So I did what we all do when we want to know something. I Googled it. And this is what it said. It said that scholars disagree on where the name came from, that there are five main theories. The first one is that it means keeper of the watch, and that the R plus N ending is believed to mean to protect or guard. So somewhere in his name at the end there is that feeling of protection or guardianship. There is also someone who thinks it comes from ancient Greek and means one who serves behind the throne. And I've never been able to pronounce this next word, so please don't wince if you do know how to pronounce it correctly. It says from the tetragrammaton, means the one. The fourth theory is that it means to guide from a Latin root. And the fifth one is that the name is actually somehow connected to the Persian god Mithra. I also know nothing about Mithra. So literally, you have just heard the extent of my knowledge about Metatron, which means rather than thinking, okay, we're not listening to this podcast, my purpose here today is not going to be so much to inform because I haven't done the research on him as to see if I can bring Samael through to answer questions. So, me not knowing a lot means that his answers are not going to be tainted by what I know historically. So, I'm very curious today. Today's podcast is a grand experiment. As Jen knows more about him than I do, but my input on this subject is going to be basically what Samael has to say.
And I am very grateful for that. I have to say, as I believe I even had said at the end of the last podcast, that I don't know a lot about Archangel Metatron. And I feel like the little bit that I kind of thought I knew, or the one thing that I would call him in for, which was help with divine timing, I feel like after that, I kind of had this awareness, and it's such a strange way for me to put it, but it's the only way that keeps coming through to me. Is it's as though I've just discovered this amazing being, and the one little part that I knew of was like his pinky toenail. And like that was the part that I was like, oh, this is him. So it's very much a take on the elephant kind of thing, where I was going, wow, divine timing. I feel like it's just this teeny part of who he is and what he helps with. And I have to say, I am absolutely not even close to an expert on Metatron. And as the conversation goes on and the idea of sacred geometry comes up, I was like, oh, wait a minute. Yeah, wait, I know something about that. So I feel like I've had energetic experiences with Metatron before. I've been in groups of people and doing all kinds of energetic and spiritual work where he has come in. But my direct relationship and knowledge is very, very new. As we started talking about him, I felt like my entire body had become inhabited with something higher vibrating, and it extended several inches beyond my body, and my face was super flushed. And so I'm going to just rely on the trust that what started coming through at the part of the conversation that we're about to play for you, that it was just, I felt like it was coming through me, not so much my thinking words. And as Samael is saying, talk about this, talk about that, I was thinking, what? I don't know anything really about this. And then all these things would started coming out. And so I'm really trusting that we're going to be able to tap back into that again today and bring through whatever is meant to come through here for this. And I love that you called this a grand experiment, because it absolutely is. This is such a new way for us to be operating. And
We've never done anything like this before. This is like channeling in real time. Um,
yeah, and it's
and
scary and exciting and exhilarating all at the same time.
and just to give listeners an idea of how energized you were. So normally we record a podcast and then a couple of days later we both start editing on it. It takes us a couple of days. At the end of the last podcast, I had to go. I had to drive somewhere to meet a friend. I get up to the town that I'm going to, and that night I discover, like, Jen writes me, and she's already edited the entire podcast in like five different versions. Like, there was so much energy coming through
Yes.
her that she was like a super powered editing woman. And I was like, oh my God, what is going on? Like,
And it
I
hasn't
got
stopped. Like I did another version last night at like 9:30 before I went to bed. And this morning was like we have to start recording the next one right now.
Yeah, it's like he's giving us like this incredible boost of energy.
So what you will hear here at the beginning is the continuation of the process
That sounds
from our
perfect.
last conversation.
I will tell you that ever since you have said Metatron's name, Samael is literally just sitting in the background saying that name over and over again.
All right. Well, I am definitely up for hearing what he wants to tell us about Metatron.
Like, you're sitting there talking and he's going, Metatron, 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 Metatron. That would shake the seraphim. I think he needs a reset. So then I said, what are you doing? And he said, Metatron, 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 Metatron. He said it five more times. And then he said, call him in. Say his name seven times. He's done it a lot more than seven, but he said it seven. He was saying it like he was chanting it. But be prepared. His work may not be what you think you see, but his gift is not wrong. So I believe he's saying, if you want to call him in, saying his name seven times, I guess opens a gate where he will start to listen a bit. I mean, he's already around, but I guess his notice will come to you. But be prepared. His work may not be what you think you seek. So you're going to be like, okay, I said Metatron seven times. I sat there. I called in the angels. I'm feeling something great. I get in my car and I immediately, like, end up in a fender bender. Okay, what was that? But that his gift is not wrong. It's not just necessarily in our human perception what we think we see. There he goes. He's just saying the name. Apparently, he is very enamored of you having said Metatron.
Wow. And it does, I think so much work when we're doing soul work and we're really calling in and wanting that which is in our highest good. We think that that means, I'm calling in divine timing. And really, probably somewhat what we mean is make sure that I get there on time and nobody's mad at me, and that may not really be what's in our highest good. But what
Right.
we get is something that looks different. And I think that happens a lot with working with angels or working with the divine in general, is that when we really call in and surrender to what is in our highest good, it's not likely to look like what we think it's going to look like. But we
Yes.
have to hold that faith that it is, this is exactly what is meant to happen to get us to where we really need to go and to
Yes.
really serve our soul's purpose, not necessarily. And it doesn't mean that it's going to serve our schedule or make sure that we show up, that the meeting goes the way that we think it's going to. And the more we can release from outcome, the more we can accept. Because so many times people will say, well, I asked for this guidance, or I asked an angel to come in, but this is what happened. And it's only our perspective of it then that makes it a bad thing. And so people will think, well, it didn't work because I asked an angel to come and help me with this and it didn't work. But I guarantee you it did work for your soul's highest good. You just haven't been able to understand it and see it from the perspective that we need it. And there is a degree of being willing to let go of the control of what we think it needs to be if we really want to heal and move forward and grow.
Yes.
And
Yes.
that's hard. It is
Yeah.
hard.
Yeah. Yeah. It's hard because you have to trust that somebody else might know better for you and be able to see farther than what you can currently see, you
Yeah.
know? So it's so funny. I'm so hung up on the say his name seven times. And I've been thinking here, I'm curious to know what you know about the number seven. What occurred to me. So in numerology, well, there's lots of different types of numerology. And I know there's one based on angels, but I don't know much about that one. The one that I know the most about is Pythagorean numerology, which is the one that's used the most in Western magic and that sort of thing. And we can go down a whole thing on Pythagorean numerology. We could do a whole episode on that one day if we want. But everybody has a birth number. And the way you get your birth number is you add up all the digits in your birthday and reduce it down to one number. So, say my birthday was May 1st, 1972. May is the fifth month. So, I would add 5 plus 1 plus 1 plus 9 plus 7 plus 2, and I'll get a number. And then I add those digits together and I keep doing that until I get a number between 1 and 9. Now, 11s and 22s and 33s are something different, but we're not going to get into that today. I will tell you my birth number is a 7. It was interesting because I know a little bit about 7. Um, One of the things that was taught to me about numerology is that sevens often are fascinated with history and often don't feel that they fit in the time and place in which they were actually born. They often feel like they belong to a different time or a different. And so it was interesting to me that whole idea of not fitting in time, and Metatron is divine timing. So I was like, oh, there's a little link there in time. And I'd be really curious to know, and listeners, if somebody there knows a lot about the number 7, I would love to know, especially what it represents in other cultures and things like that as well.
It's interesting when you were talking about, I realize another major way that people connect with Metatron is there's like the Merkaba, or they say Metatron's cube. I believe he works with a Merkaba, and
Mm.
you can create that geometric, that like sacred geometric structure around yourself and use it as a time transport, not necessarily of your physical body, but to access different points and places in the universe, more as far as levels of consciousness, or access different planes of consciousness. That's probably a better way of saying it. And it makes sense given that space and time are kind of intricately woven. I don't know if I'm accurate in that or not, but
Well,
it
I
feels like
will,
that space time thing is connected.
I will tell you, Samuel is going a little bit nuts right now. He keeps saying, speak on the numbers. Tell her to talk of sacred geometry. And I'm like, okay, I think that maybe is an upcoming podcast episode. If we do sacred geometry and talk about like crystal grids and that sort of thing, because Metatron's cube is used a lot of times on those grids, isn't it? And didn't you just tell me the other day there was somebody working with crystals that you were listening to?
Yeah, and really it's more definitely working with crystals. The sacred geometry that I'm speaking of is not so much putting it on paper into a two-dimensional thing, but actually placing it around your body and in your body, your energy field, or placing it in your energy field and utilizing that to activate your luminous body and activate like certain aspects of your abilities or your capacity, and that
Oh
you
my
can
God.
then use that. I know I've used the Merkaba in a sound healing energy like journey to transport myself to another level of consciousness, or another plane of consciousness, where certain healing and access to certain guides and wisdom was able to be tapped into. So I'm thinking that maybe that's the way in which he means. The other thing is the sphere and the point within the sphere, which is, I'm definitely not a sacred geometry expert at all, but the biggest thing that I've accessed, that I've come to understand, is the sense of us being both a point within the center of a sphere and the sphere itself, and vacillating between the two.
I am so excited now to learn because I don't know anything about this. And he is literally, yes, yes, this is the time, sound and numbers and shapes and vibrations. There
You know,
seems to be some excitement to follow up discussion of Metatron with something along the lines of shapes and sound and numbers and vibrations. A little bit about what you were just
Yeah.
speaking of. I think we may have to have an episode on this.
I feel like because he said this is the time, I should say this while like my whole body is vibrating. Like I have that sense of something else is around me or in me doing things. Because when he said talk about sacred geometry, I was like, I don't know about sacred geometry much. So, but I think this feels related. The sense of talking about the sphere and the point, because we talked about coming into this body so that we could have a certain perspective and learn our lessons from a certain perspective. And there's a lot about nowadays the idea that we are both a field of energy and a particle. So it's like we are both this kind of singular part, the singular like point within a circle as a particle, and we are a field. Like think of like maybe an aura or like all of this space, a big glob of energy, and that we can kind of vacillate between our particle self and our field self. And I've done some work with this and the idea of that circle and the point within the circle. And what I've been shown is in a number of, I don't know, altered states, I guess, for lack of a better word, is that we vacillate between going down into that center point. And at the center point, we have the ability to look around and see and observe everything else from our perspective. So I can see myself as separate from everything else. And then I can look around and learn about myself by looking almost like at the reflection of that back. But then when I merge with the whole field, it's like I expand from that center point out to the whole of that circle, and ideally really seeing it more as a sphere. Then I have the sense of that pure unity with everything, and that higher sense that the angels get a sense of, that they know of, that perspective of we are all one, everything is connected. But from that space, I can't do the work that I'm meant to do and learn about my individuated part of my soul from that space. So I need to expand to that field state and feel into that to be reminded of the unity and the whole, but then also return to my more physicalized, embodied awareness where I can look at the reflections of where my soul is on my journey by looking at how the world is responding to me and how others are reacting and how my world is reacting to me. And from those lessons, I can heal and integrate and then also expand back into the whole. And I think that may be what he's talking about, how we move the whole forward.
Yes, yes.
And it's that going in and out from that particle kind of state to the expanded awareness, that's how we can ideally do our work here.
I am so glad that you wrote down the stuff that he conversed with you about next week because I am now at the point where I'm writing over his words from last week to put down his words from this week. As you were doing that, there is a lot of enthusiasm, one and many, inside and outside at once. You are the point. The souls are the sphere. The ring is the sphere of remembering, the duality of perspective. He is agreeing wholeheartedly with what you just said, that what you just said is basically the key that explained that vision that I had right after I had had brain surgery. That when I saw that ring of souls and I was in the ring of souls and I could remember everything and I was looking down into the earth. And then there were people, and then I went down into the plane of the earth where I was just one entity again. There was that feeling of separation. And that's exactly what you're talking about, the point and the sphere. When we're in the sphere, we have the angel's view of things. When we are the point, which is where you and I are both sitting today, our perspective is very low to the ground. But our work is to try to expand to try to be able to get to a place where we are conscious of the whole sphere while we are in this point and realize that our work here is to reach out to other people with compassion and empathy and love around us so that we can all journey through this lab here on Earth before we will one day go back out to
Yeah.
the
And
bigger
there,
sphere.
yeah, and there are many ways of accessing that sphere state. That tapping into our field sense, meditation, shamanic journeying, sound healing journeying, even Reiki sessions, healing sessions, asking in the angels, connecting with nature. There are so many ways of expanding our awareness. And I think that's such an important part. And we'll have to talk about that as well. One of the other things that comes to me that I feel like I'm supposed to get in here is that I was given this vision in one of my chakra dance experiences where we are all these multifaceted mirrored orbs that are constantly rotating around each other, and almost like bodies in the heavens, like planets or something, that we're all, think of like a multifaceted crystal where there are all these little reflective points on it, and that we're rotating around each other in space. And that's what us being here physicalized on Earth is like. And our whatever we are working on is going to be reflected back to us by the people that are around us, by the situations that happen to us, by our physical circumstances. It's like we are all mirroring and reflecting back to each other the parts that we need to heal, the parts that are healed. And in doing that, we help each other grow. And so if we can, and when we see things from that perspective, we are less in a victim stance of all these things just keep happening to me, but rather go, oh, this is the universe reflecting back to me the parts of me, my own brokenness, and the parts of me that are ready to be healed. Or it's showing me myself reflected out into everything else. And that's part of why we need to be in that center point particle state, is that in that state we get that reflection of ourselves from all of the things around, but not to get so attached to that particle state that we forget that we are actually all whole. Because if we can operate from that place of wholeness, of that field state, then we recognize that we cannot harm anyone else without harming ourselves. If we think of ourselves as a part of one whole body, we wouldn't cut off our toe because we thought it was terrible, because we would recognize, if I cut off my toe, that's a part of me, the whole of my body. Blood is going to flow from all of me out that part. When we can see everything as a part of ourselves from that greater perspective, then it allows us to operate from a place of compassion and empathy with each other, because we are so interconnected. We know that we cannot harm someone else without harming ourselves at the same time.
So interesting because you ended that with at the same time. And there's a lot of time coming. Oh, he is so locked on Metatron. Metatron is the keeper of being, of timing of all times. He manages the divine within the earthly perspective. He helps you see outside of human time.
Wow. All right.
The other thing I just wanted to share was, so Samael had mentioned say his name 7 times. And while I was away on my overnight trip, every time I had a little quiet period, I would just sit and say his name 7 times. And suddenly all of these things came to fruition. We talk about Metatron being divine timing. Um, People that I know who've been trying to get jobs for months, all of a sudden I was getting texts saying they'd gotten a job. People who had been worried about something and it had been lingering out there for a long time, all of a sudden I was getting news that those situations had been resolved. It's been like that since we stopped recording the podcast on Monday morning. It's just all of these energies that were lying dormant and weren't getting anywhere are now all coming up to the level and resolving themselves and moving again. It's almost like we're in some sort of really cool hot tub of energy and the currents are just flowing. Someone hit the button. Um, Almost so much that it's like you got to hold on to something or the bubbles are going to take you. There were time periods where Samael was just sitting off to the side, repeating Metatron's name over and over and over again, like it was a meditation or it was a chant. And I wasn't trying to count them because he was doing it in the background the whole time I was talking. I write Metatron's name 7 times. Like I put it down here on paper. If anything will come through. And this is what came through. And I don't know what it means, but we will see. It might come out later in our discussion. So I wrote Metatron down 7 times. And when I got to the bottom, I simply started tracing over it again. I don't know if anybody who's listening has ever constructed a sigil or done sigil writing. Are symbols. There's actually this is a whole really neat thing we could do a podcast on at some point. There are methods for creating symbols that are used to invoke or summon certain deities or entities. If you look at the cover of my book of Samael, there's one there that is always associated with him. But you don't just have to use the ancient ones, you can create new ones. And there's a whole method for doing this. So I thought, okay, there's definitely power in the written word. I'm just finding myself compelled to keep tracing his name over and over again. Let me write out his name and then just keep writing it over and over and over again. Samael said, the holy number is 3, 7 times 7 times 7. And he repeated that a couple of times. And the holy number 3, I know in witchcraft, 3 is a big deal. I know among Norse pagans, 9, which is 3 times 3, is a very holy number. And even if we look at Christianity, you have the Father, Son, and Holy Ghost, right? You have that 3 that shows up in a lot of world faiths. So Samael said, the holy number is 3, 7 times 7 times 7. And then in numerology, you add those digits and you get down to 1. And we set up a top. Uh, one of one of Metatron's names is the One, which I just thought was interesting. The other thing is then Samael started talking about time and eternity. And he said, 7 is time, 8 is eternity. What follows 7 is the 8, the number of eternity, the balance of the above and the below. 7 is time, 8 is the number outside of time. And I was immediately thought about if you take an 8 and you turn it on its side, you get the eternity symbol. And I was thinking how I think it's the Two of Pentacles card in tarot shows if you look at like a deck or one of the more traditional decks, there's a man there juggling 2 pentacles inside an eternity symbol, and it's a card of balance, right? I'm getting the feeling that we're getting a little bit into numerology here, but if we think of Metatron as a 1 or the first step in the beginning or that point before you get to the field, and he also has something to do with time. 7 also has something to do with time. If you add 1 and 7 together, you get 8, and 8 is the number outside of time. I don't know what all this means. I'm taking a guess. But we have something going on with 1s, 7s, and 8s right now as I keep copying his name over and over and the concept of time.
That's really interesting. So, before this podcast, I decided that I was going to sit and connect with Metatron and invite him in and have kind of a personal experience with him. And I felt his energy and it felt very settling. But then there's just this excitement, this like electricity that keeps coming through me every time I start thinking about talking about him. I felt like I could really feel his energy and that I was going to try doing some automatic writing, which I've done in the past. and has been, really pretty effective. And so I thought, okay, let's just do this and see what happens. And I feel like it meshes with what you were saying with the sense of eternity. And so I'm going to just read this and then we can see where it goes. I asked, what would you have me know of you? What is in the highest good to know about you? And the answer I got was everything. Everything that is knowable serves a purpose. It is all good. And so I thought, okay, I'm going to have to narrow this down. So I said, I'm going to be sharing this with many who will listen to learn about angels. And you in particular, what would you like me to know and share? And there is only so much that can be shared and understood. And thought, yeah, that is absolutely true. But still felt like, okay, maybe I'm not asking the right questions. We're not getting there. And I said, what are your particular skills and talents? Because when you look up Metatron, you get all of these different things. And some people are saying, time and space. And some people are saying sacred geometry, lots of sacred geometry and clearing limiting beliefs. And there are all these different things. So I thought, okay, I'm going to get maybe something for this. And I work with the all and shape it into forms that can be utilized and benefit others. I shape reality into new forms that better serve the whole. I shape them within human consciousness and help in shifting reality from a false view of the self to a more complete one. And I said, if someone calls on you for help, what might they expect to happen? And he said, they will always receive it. And it was interesting to me because there became this very serious, very strong energy about it. There was this shift in the tone of things, and it was very strong. It was like, they will always receive it. I am bound and dedicated to serve humanity and its evolution and ascension. I take my job very seriously and will aid in the ways that I can, in the ways that I know will serve the whole and the individual well. I am not to be feared, for what you seek, what you truly seek beyond the outer illusions is to move forward. And that is what I provide, ways of moving forward.
Wow.
And then I said, what are some of the ways that you help us to move forward? And he said, complete and total freedom from the confines of your mind, the place that shackles you to falsehoods and illusions, space to dream a new world into being, time to expand consciousness and access higher dimensions of possibilities. I am possibilities. I am confined by nothing but the all in its limitlessness, and therefore am infinite in my approach. You cannot conceive of the infinite from the veil of illusion that holds you in bodies. And I said, I have read that you were once in a body as a human. Is this accurate? And what I got was, not as you understand it. I understand what it is to be human, and that causes confusion. But in your terms of incarnate humans, no, I have not. And I said, do you work with the Merkaba to clear energy and limiting beliefs from us? Because that was one of the things where it was like, he puts this Merkaba in and he uses it in these various ways, and it spins and it clears all these limiting beliefs and it does all these things. And he said, I do what is needed in whatever way is needed to bring freedom. I am not confined to a tool or a method or a modality. That is a human construct. And I thought, oh my goodness, that's so in alignment with what we were talking about last week of, we want to categorize, we want to put things into, hierarchies. We want to say, these are the skills that this person does. This is what this angel does. And, it's all just such a small part of it. So I thought that was really so much in line with the messages and some of the things we were talking about last week. I was like,
Yes.
yeah, here we go. We're trying to do this with angels and archangels at that.
Um,
And so I have one more thing that I'll add, but actually, it
keep
sounds like you
going.
have something to, do you want to
No, no,
comment
but I
that
want you to keep going because I now have a page and a half of communications about what you just said, and I don't want to
fabulous.
ruin the flow. So,
Okay, so then I said, how would you suggest people connect with you if they would like help moving forward? And he said, summon me as you have been taught, which I felt very strongly it was what Samael had said of saying his name 7 times. And so, summon me as you have been taught, and with an open heart. Be ready for change, hungry for it, open to it, ripe for the picking. Embrace the infinite possibilities. And then after that, I felt like the possibility should maybe not be there. So embrace the infinite and be willing to merge with it. Your life will never be the same. But isn't that what you want? To move beyond where you are now and discover the infinite, to throw off the cloaks that hide your magnificence and discover your true worthiness, to learn your power and the magic that is your own, to be free. Walk with me then, if you will, and you will see forever.
wow.
And so when you started talking about the infinity sign and space and time and the infinite, I started thinking, okay, I'm starting to have a little bit more confidence in what I've brought through.
I like I am not a drinker, but I'm starting to think we're going to need some sort of substance to be able to fathom the stuff that's coming. Guys, this is like a mind stretching day.
Yeah.
So as you were talking, Samael is chatty today, and here's what he said. Geometry is space. This is what Pythagoras learned in Egypt. I'm going to aside here for a minute. If you don't know the history of Pythagoras, so I'm going to give you just like a little bit of a clip here. You probably know Pythagoras from the Pythagorean theorem in high school. A squared plus b squared equals c squared, right? And you probably hate him for it. Pythagoras is thought of as the father of geometry. And but one of the things that's really interesting about him is that he was back in his day actually also considered what we would probably call a cult leader. um, and the way that it happened is he didn't spend most of his life in Greece. First off, the oracle at Delphi told his father before Pythagoras was born that when the child was born, he would be a benefit to all mankind. And Pythagoras lived in a very busy sort of trading city. There were lots of people of different backgrounds moving in and out. He had a good education, and then he went to Egypt, they believe. And they believe that he actually spent the majority of his life in Egypt studying with the priests there. And he may also have spent some time in the Middle East. And then later on in life, he returned to Greece to open a school, right? And the school was revolutionary in a couple of ways. Number one, it was vegetarian, and he is one of the first famous vegetarians. Second, he allowed and encouraged women to join the school, which was really unheard of at that time in Greece, that he thought both his male and female philosophy students were equal. He is on a spiritual journey. He thought, how does nature know to make animals that of one kind that all have the same number of legs? He thought that there were divine formulas that could explain not only how nature worked, the patterns that God was using to construct the universe, and that if he could figure out some of these patterns, we might be able to explain human behavior mathematically. And as he was doing this, what we would consider metaphysical work, he accidentally created geometry along the way. So when you're getting your a squared plus b squared equals c squared, that entire field of math got generated because Pythagoras was looking for mathematical equations used by the gods. So he did spend this tremendous amount of time in Egypt. And so if you didn't know that, I just wanted to jump aside to throw that in. So let's go back to Samael now. He said, geometry is space. This is what Pythagoras learned in Egypt. Just as we all shift forms, we are also shifting forms. I do not know exactly what is meant by that. Maybe we come back to that later. The magics of what you call Egypt are the study of Metatron. Metatron. He is different from the others. He is of the archangels, but also outside. He is beyond manifestation. The angles between the stars in the great space. His very nature cannot be contained, but he can flow through the mind. Skin can no longer hold him. To connect, count, and look at the stars and understand that your being has no limits. Metatron is vibration itself. You cannot fathom his totality. He instructs the other angels as we evolve.
Wow.
Yeah, there's a
Whoa.
little bit there to unpack.
Yeah. It's so it is so validating because as I was going through and asking these questions and as I was getting to the end and I was thinking, I feel like infinite is the theme of everything that he was saying. It was just this limitlessness and this infinity. And that's exactly what Samael is talking about. I am
Yes.
blown away.
Angles between the stars in the great space, and he is vibration itself. So when we think about, and actually, oh my God, I just realized this, that's actually something else Pythagoras talked about. Pythagoras had the theory of the music of the spheres. And if you are listening and you don't know this, we're going to jump in a little bit into this. So now I'm starting to think, oh my God, maybe I know more about Metatron than I thought because I know about Pythagoras. Um, the music of the spheres, and you have to remember, Pythagoras was doing this work before the birth of Christ. Like, this is a long time ago, okay? He had this theory back then that all of the planets gave off vibration, that everything in the world was vibration. And that there were certain constants and certain vibrations that repeated themselves over and over in nature. Now, he had no way of necessarily proving this, but we now know that a lot of this is true. If you know anything about string theory and some of these really cutting edge ideas in physics, they are proving today that really everything is vibration. If you go down, atoms vibrate, right? And Pythagoras had no way of seeing the atom, but this concept of the music of the spheres, that everything around you was vibrating and the spheres being the planets, that they were giving off a unique, because music is vibration, a unique music of their own. And that the planets themselves and the planet that we stand on and all of nature around us and every human has a unique vibration. So Pythagoras thought that as you're walking through your day, you are being affected by all of these vibrations around you, and they are going to help form the experiences that you have. So if we think now forward to, Jen, you do sound healing, you sing at the beginning of every episode to bring in, to take us to a new place vibrationally. This is all, this is what energy work is it's moving and adjusting and changing those vibrations that Pythagoras was writing about after his time in ancient Egypt thousands of years ago. And now we have the science, we're starting to get the science in place to see that a lot of this theory is true. So he's telling us that Metatron's very being is in these vibrations.
Yeah. And maybe is these vibrations. I
Yes,
think.
I think
Was it because
so.
he said he is the vibration? I think was
Vibration.
that
That's what he says. Skin can no longer hold him. Metatron, Metatron, Metatron is vibration itself.
is vibration itself. And you're right. The songs of the spheres, and there's so much incredible work being done. John Stewart Reed has absolutely groundbreaking studies about sound and visible sound, and that sound is actually a sphere, and it's spherical. It's not a wave. They can now show that it is actually, like, as you're talking, it creates these spheres, and the spheres look like mandalas if you take like a splice of them. And that not only do the planets and the stars and all of this have a song, a vibration that they're giving off, but that each cell in the human body has a song. And the difference between a healthy liver cell and a diseased liver cell, their song is different. And he has a whole realm of medicine that he's envisioning the application of. He has something called a cymoscope that he's developed that is essentially sound made visible. And that if he can develop something where someone in a surgery can go in and they're trying to get the margins and find out exactly where the edge of a tumor is, that if they can see the songs of the cells, then they could see exactly where the healthy songs are, exactly where those healthy cells are, and know exactly the perfect margins. And I love the idea of Pythagoras talking about, how is it that a frog knows to end up with four legs? And there's so much where they're starting to be able to show, and I don't remember the exact type of photography, but there's a type of photography where you can take like a seed of something or an acorn and see in its energy field the complete oak tree. And I believe that part of Veda Austin's work, and basically she works with the consciousness of water, and will take a petri dish with a very small amount of water and imprint it with some kind of influence, either a thought or an image that she lays under it. And she's put a seed in that water. So basically, she does that and then she freezes it in this special way. And there are images then in that frozen ice. And you will get an image of a tree if you have, or whatever the full complete plant is, from a seed.
Oh my God, that's incredible. I have a little bit more from Samael, and this is interesting because last week you were talking about the angels of everything. You were saying you could call him the angel of the podcast or the angel of whatever. Samael comments on that right now. He says, the angels of everything are the names of vibrations. It is easier for humans to connect to the angels than to the concept of vibration itself. Your voice and being call out to the angels, and the angels respond. It is a meeting of two songs. It helps you to find them.
Wow, that's amazing. I
Sorry, the it helps you to find them should have come after. It is, I was writing up the side of the paper. It is easier for humans to connect to the angels than to the vibration itself. It helps you to find them. Your voice and being call out to the angels, and the angels respond. It is a meeting of two songs. So I think what he's saying, although we may discover this is wrong in 10 minutes, um, you put out your, I'm going to send intention, I'm going to invite this angel in. Come and connect with me. And in doing that, you are putting out your intention or using your song or your voice or the vibrations created by dance. You are turning your energy and moving it, seeping out. And then the vibrations that the angels have, they respond to it. So they reach towards you. And where the two touch, there's going to be a new and unique vibration formed of your questing and them reaching towards you. And he says, in those meetings is how knowledge is transferred. Okay, this got
Nice.
deep.
I feel like there's so many pieces of things that are trying to come together.
Yeah,
So when he's saying, what I'm calling angels, as far as like the Kabbalah talking about that there is an angel for every blade of grass, essentially it is maybe not necessarily an angel in the sense that Samael is an angel, but a term for a vibration. Or maybe angels are vibration, and that's our word for that kind of vibration.
he says the vibrations have consciousness. So I think we're going to probably have to drill down at some point into the concept of an angel. We're using that word to mean seraphim, cherubim, all those different levels that we see writers write about in Christianity, that sort of thing. So that's a name we've given for a being that has a certain job. But that the idea that there is an angel for every blade of grass, there is, because each of those blades of grass has a separate vibration, and that vibration has a consciousness. So those consciousnesses can also be seen as angels, but we might be using the same word for two different things. Oh God, this always gets back to that idea of we don't have enough words to apply to all of these
No,
things.
how many times do we end up in these conversations where, we keep using the term dark and light, and there should be about 50 different versions for that because we meet, they mean different things. Yeah. So
Yes.
and I think that's really good. We started with the idea of trying to define angels last week. And I realized that was probably the hardest thing. It was like, oh, let's just go back to the beginning and give people a basis of what is an angel. And then it was so much harder than I realized it was going to be. And maybe that's part of what this discussion needs to be, is that
Yes.
really helping us to hone into what do we mean when we say angel, or not necessarily maybe what do we mean, but what are we actually addressing, and what are these beings that we're calling angels? And now I remember what the part was that this was tapping into. You remember we were having a conversation, and I believe it was the one that kind of sparked all of this, where it was after episode maybe 6, and then our conversation continued. And we were having
Yes.
a conversation about this angel work and the angelic gateways and the Brett Bevel healing that I've been doing. And he said, go back and talk about the everything. And there was a part where he was addressing the everything. And he was talking about saying, for me to go back and talk about, it was what I said about electricity. And that I was saying how when our energy is all kind of out of whack and we're really kind of spinning out of control and the electronics start going out,
Yes.
that we need to get ourselves sort of back together. And when we do, those other things, kind of come back online. But I think what he was directing us to, and we started talking about, was he said something about it's an interaction of everything, that it's us relating to, really, that relating to the consciousness of everything around us, and that interaction that will bring in much more of a sense of peace and much more cohesion than just us deciding we need to get centered, we need to get grounded. And I feel
Yes.
like this is tying into Metatron in such a big way, because Metatron being that vibration of everything, and him talking about the interaction between the consciousness of the blade of grass or the consciousness of whatever it is that we're interacting with, that when we're doing that consciously and we can bring all of that into balance and harmony, then we have reached a much more complete place.
Yes. Okay, I have a little bit more.
Brace yourselves.
Well, he's also trying to use words I understand. And then what we've determined now is that we need more words. The same way Eskimos have, what do they say, like 50 words for snow or something like that? That, like we need words for different types of darkness and light and all those things like you were saying. He wrote, think of the idea of angels as vibrational holy beings, but there are not just angels there. I have a similar vibration to certain others, so humans call us angels, even though we are unique. And then he said, Metatron is the pulse of creation. I might need to lie down after this podcast.
Wow. Yeah, I feel like I need to sit and meditate on each little piece of this and go
Mhm.
back to it over and over. I feel like we will definitely need to make sure that the transcript of this is more edited than normal so that I just
Yes.
even for my own personal sake that I can go back and read this over and over and sit with it because there is so much here to take in.
You just said your categories are limiting. So
Yeah,
we're
once
getting back to
again.
your categories are limiting. So we here in our lovely human bodies with our lovely human minds are trying to wrap our head around the infinity of numbers and the infinity of space and the infinity of the sheer number of vibrations that are as huge as the universe and as small as an atom. And we are trying, because that's hard for us to do, to put things into categories. This is an angel. We talked before about how humans like to categorize so that we can get down to brass tacks and feel like we can wrap our hands around something. Oh my goodness, there's a whole herd of deer running through my front yard. There they go. Sorry for this brief distraction there. It was just like, here comes the wild. So we're dealing with these massive ideas and also these extremely small ideas that are related to the massive ideas. And we are somewhere in between trying to apply categories and words for our understanding. And I think one of the things that Samael is saying here is we go, Metatron and Samael are angels. But there may be a small part of their vibration that is similar. The majority of them is a unique creature with a unique role. And Metatron's is massive. Sat down to him and said, what do I need to know about you? And his response is
Yeah,
everything. And you're
everything.
like, could you break it down for the human on the podcast here a little bit? Like, I haven't, I'm in this body for a finite period of time. I'm just trying to wrap my head around what happens after death on this go round. And you're telling me I need to be able to conceive of everything. And I mean, that's one of the reasons why religion sprang up in the first place is the human need to make sense of what is going on around them. Oh, I'm going to go back to your thing. Our idea of we are both a point and we are a field. Metatron is a massive field, and we can connect with the point, perhaps because as humans, we are limited in only being able to try to reach out towards the point because the field is so immense that we then end up with trying to communicate with a bunch of other angels who are in between Metatron's vastness and ourselves.
Yeah. Wow.
I'm just I'm kind of just stare at a wall for a while.
Yeah, I think it's really because the universe is infinite and because Metatron is infinite. He said, I am possibilities. It's that energy before. And I wonder if Metatron is almost like just a step slightly closer in from that space of God from which everything comes. If Metatron comes in before things start to get closer to manifestation, that he's like a little bit further in. He's that vibration of all of the possibilities before they have come into any kind of form. I just keep saying before, he's like part of the energy of the before. And given that, like he said, you cannot conceive of the infinite from the veil of illusion that holds you in bodies. And I think that's where our particle self, like that point within the circle, we can't conceive of it. So we have to operate in the world of categories and calling things this, that, and the other. And we can only sense the infinite. We can only really get a sense of and experience it when we tap into our field selves. And that's something that happens in meditation, in moments when we feel that expanded, I am part of everything. And it can come in through all different types of energy work, sound work, all different types of meditation. But those things that get us beyond those veils, that's when we can get a more true sense of the experience of Metatron, or who Metatron is, or Samael, or any of this that we're talking about. It's like it's something that we truly cannot make sense of with our thinking brain. We can only experience it. Yes. And my sound healing teacher, who is also deeply trained in ancient Tibetan wisdom, talks about the deeper meaning of Tantra and Sutra. And one is the experience of the inarticulable, and the other is the attempt to articulate that which is inarticulable. And I feel like this is really what we're tapping into, is that thing that is inarticulable, but it's when we step into the energy of it, step into that field, and we leave our thinking rational kind of minds behind. That's when we experience it. But there's a reason why they call it, that which is inarticulable, and the experience of that which is inarticulable.
Yes. So I was on a question as you were speaking, and I wrote to Samael, do we all exist within Metatron? And he wrote, yes, and he exists within God. He is the building blocks. And then just to see what would happen, I wrote, what is going to happen next? And he laughed and said, Metatron. And then he said, I commune with my teacher. I build from him. I am the word. The word comes from the need to speak. He is the vibration of sound that is used to make the word.
Okay.
We're going to need like a week to go through.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah, this is amazing. So he exists within God.
Yes.
So Metatron exists within God, and Metatron is the building blocks from which everything is created, which makes sense, the idea of sacred geometry and the connection of him, because sacred geometry being like the building blocks of all life. And that would make sense that people have made that association between sacred geometry and saying that's who Metatron is, or that's his skill, or that's what he works with. And also space and time, which are, again, they're all like spaces and building blocks for all life.
And then he says time, space, vibration, atoms. He is movement itself. Metatron, Metatron, Metatron. He is very enamored of repeating Metatron's name.
Yeah. Well, and it's interesting because he was saying to repeat it 7 times to call him in, but I notice he keeps saying it 3 times, which is interesting to me.
I'm wondering if he does 3 and we do 7, or if it changes over time, or if the 3, because he said 3 is a holy number. But hold on, we have another little something. 3 to honor him. It is devotional. So Samael calls him in by saying or invoking his name 3 times, and it's a sign of respect because 3 is a holy number. But if we want to call him in, at least at the current time, 7 will help us to get into the right space.
And
Is that
seven, I think he had said 7 attracts his attention.
yes, 7 is time. You, both of you, are bound by time as you are incarnated. Okay, so we've got to do 7 because we're in human bodies. Is that
Okay.
right?
That makes it's like we need to,
Yes.
because 7 is time, it helps him almost to locate and narrow down to
Where we
this
are.
human incarnation of the calling of our soul for him.
Yes. But when Samael speaks of him, he's doing it as a gesture of respect, repeating his name 3 times.
Okay.
And he says, oh, it shows I pause. My thoughts to respect him. So I guess if you were just sort of rambling along on your own, that's one thing. But if you stop periodically to say the name of, I guess, a teacher of his and repeat their name 3 times, you're showing that you're stopping to honor that name and respect it. And that's what he's doing. He did say at one point that angelic society is very structured and ceremonial. And if we think about the fact that Metatron may even be a bigger field or a bigger entity, he's there and he helps teach the other angels and give them tools to build from. And when I say him, I'm not trying to be gendered about this. I'm a human trying to look for a word that, oh God, now my brain just exploded. Um, so Samael is pausing to give respect, but he's invoking him in a different way than we are invoking him
When it
because
sounds
we're
almost
different
like he's
beings.
not invoking him
No,
in
he's
saying
just
it, he's honoring him. He's
he's
showing
honoring him, he's
respect
paying
and honoring
respect.
him as since he's
Yes.
speaking about him.
Yes. And sometimes he just uses him in the word, but then he periodically stops and repeats the name. When I said what is going to happen next, he just laughed and said Metatron once.
Yeah. Well, and I was wondering if Samuel can speak to how you were saying over the last 24 hours, you've been just saying his name, Metatron 7 times, and all of these amazing things have been happening for the people around you. And saying that and invoking that energy, it's like you're bringing through possibilities. And I was thinking, I need to look back at what he said. Complete and total freedom from the confines of your mind, the place that shackles you to falsehoods and illusions. Space to dream a new world into being. Time to expand consciousness and access higher dimensions of possibility. So, in your saying his name 7 times and invoking him, it lifted those shackles of the falsehoods and illusions that were holding the limits or the beliefs of limits in those individuals. If we think of it as that their limiting beliefs were actually the thing that was keeping these new things from being able to come into their lives,
Yes.
that by you invoking him, it was able to be lifted. And once the lifting of their limiting beliefs happened, the universe could flow to them immediately what it had been flowing to them all along. I don't remember where I heard it, of the idea that the universe is constantly flowing blessings to us, like raining down blessings on us, but we're holding an umbrella. And that in invoking him, that it's like it took down the umbrella, and those blessings that had been pouring down were able to get through because that those limiting beliefs were dissolved.
Yes. He said, "You are changing the vibration of the space when you say his name. You call from inside a certain stream of time." So I think what you said earlier about we're showing him where we are sounds accurate.
I'm like, my brain is, yeah, so many things are happening
Yeah.
all at once. It's like trying to pull them together. And
You are never going to believe this, but it's almost, look at the time.
yeah, once again, we've just talked forever. Wow. So, we have definitely, covered more than enough for one podcast. And
So
whew,
listeners, we would like if you could to contemplate Pythagoras, the magic of ancient Egypt, the hierarchy of angels, vibrations, the music of the spheres, how to call out to a vast field of angelic energy. We've got a
yeah,
lot going
how
on
to
here today.
recategorize everything that you know. Um, yeah. So, just a little bit to think about.
And
Whew,
what does time mean? Yeah.
yeah. Okay.
Well, I have
So,
never heard Samael talk about doing a devotional practice to anyone. So this is all new.
yeah, there's so much for us to learn and explore. And I have to say, I'm more than kind of excited. I am really excited about the way that these last couple podcasts are coming together. I mean, it feels like maybe it's like this is where we were actually getting to. This is what we were
Yes.
working towards, but we had to just kind of feel and stumble our way into this. And
Yes. I think we kind of had to start off with, here's who we are and here are our backgrounds and here's our paths. And then the paths start moving and opening up. And I also had to get to a place where, you know, I was comfortable just sitting down, essentially saying what he said without actually necessarily understanding a lot of it. And I think what you said earlier is very accurate when you were talking about the unknowable and the confines or the limits of the human mind and the human experience. It is our particular job, and angels all have their particular jobs, whether it is being the vibration of a particular blade of grass or talking through and trying to explain things. If you are the word, or if you are in charge of the building blocks of the angles between the stars, there's all of these different levels coming together, and we have our own specific role in this whole cosmos, but it's also a very slow process of trying to feel out beyond the boundaries of what we know here.
absolutely. And yeah, I feel like we needed those initial episodes to start getting comfortable being vulnerable and putting ourselves out there and working through the idea that we're not sitting here as experts telling people sharing our expert knowledge, but rather what we had really wanted to get to when this first came to be as an idea was the sharing the conversations and sharing the exploration.
Yes.
And I think getting to the point where we realize we're actually going to just sit here and talk and see what comes through us. And through our talking and our fumbling around, Samael comes in and corrects things, or Metatron comes and says something, or we're
Yeah.
inspired to go down a certain path and completely letting go of the reins and saying, okay, here
And
we are. We're not experts. We're two people who are willing to have an open, vulnerable conversation and see what we can bring through from it.
it's amazing to me, an hour and a half ago, you said, I look around and there's people who all say different things about what Metatron's specialty is. And what we arrived at is it's all of them. It was just each of those people writing those definitions was their different part of the elephant. Someone said sacred geometry. Someone else said they each had a category that they put him in. But in fact, it's all of those categories. because
Absolutely.
of what
And
his role is.
so much more,
Yeah.
so much more.
So, so
Whew.
listeners, if your brain is currently oozing out of your ears and down the side of your neck, we are joining you in that. We thank you so much for being part of this conversation today. And you can contact us through our website or our individual websites, but we do have I believe we do have a website through Buzzsprout. Um, and we would love to hear your thoughts on some of these things because it just continues to further the conversation, and you may have knowledge from your part of the elephant that we have not yet reached.
Absolutely. And so I feel like I know my brain is really stretched as far as it can go right now. And I would like to end as we always do with song. And it is my intention to bring through the vibrations that will help us to integrate all of this information to help to soothe us. Because when we experience and are confronted with so many different things that are beyond our understanding, sometimes it can bring up a degree of a feeling of instability or fear as well. And so it is my intention through this song to bring through the vibrations that are exactly in our highest good to meet us where we are right now in this particular incarnation, in this particular moment, and to bring soothing and a level of understanding that is inarticulable, but that we can sit with and hold from a place of possibility and also comfort and acceptance.
Thank you so much for listening this week, everybody. And Samael just wants to remind you, raise the vibration, say his name. And I said, thank you, Samael. And he said, you are most welcome.
Yes, thank you all.
And we will talk to you guys next week. Have a wonderful week, everybody.
May you be blessed.